It's time for Global Insight. From Arirang News Center in Seoul, we connect with experts around the world to hear their views on issues making headlines. North Korea fired at least 3 unidentified projectiles into the EC between Korea and Japan on Monday, with leader Kim Jong-un reportedly supervising the firing once again. It came just 1 week after the regime's first projectile test of the year. But since then, we saw an exchange of personal letters between President Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un. So it seems we are getting some mixed messages from the North. But what kind of message is the regime aiming to send out to South Korea and the rest of the world? For more, we connect with Dr. Mark Barry. He's the Associate Editor of the International Journal on World Peace. And we also have Dr. Graham Ong-Webb from Singapore's Nanyang University. Thank you for joining us today. Well, first of all, we had this surprise, or not such a surprise, test firing of 3 projectiles yesterday. And, well, it always does seem that North Korea's projectile launches are very well timed to make some sort of impact, both domestically and abroad. So what is the message that the regime wants to send this time, and to whom? I'd like to hear from both of you, but let's start with Dr. Mark Barry.
Well, they're continuing their training as they began a week ago, and according to KCNA just this morning, they're going to keep doing it. So in one sense, it's not unexpected. They also have to do it because the message it sends within the regime to not do cutting-edge military exercises is that they're not able to. And that kind of message cannot be sent to the military and the leadership. Moreover, by using these weapons, which are weapons that are more likely to be used in a counterattack scenario, as I understand it, then it is sending a message to the region and to the United States that readiness is not been undermined by any other problems, whether it be health issues or food security issues or whatever the outside world may be thinking about North Korea. So I think they're basically conveying a message of we are robust, we are well, we have our act together, and we're doing what the world should expect us to be doing, which is defend our sovereignty.
Right, so you think it's a show of strength. Well, what are your thoughts, Dr. Ong-Webb?
I agree. I mean, this is a case of maintaining a particular military posture. These exercises occur on an annual basis around this time of the year, every year. And Kim's regime is showing that they are, or at least trying to demonstrate that they are fit for purpose, right? Push come to shove. If any one of these scenarios that have been postulated that North Korea should be attacked, in their minds, they are ready and they want to demonstrate to the rest of the world that they will retaliate and take whatever adversaries that challenge them to task.
Right, and this show of strength or readiness, as you said, these launches come as the world's focus is on the spread of the coronavirus. Now, North Korea has said at least 7,000 people were under medical surveillance and later announced that some foreigners had been released. Well, we don't know for certain how severe the COVID-19 spread is within the North's borders. But could this also be a way of calling for medical assistance, Dr. Ong-Webb?
I'm not quite sure if the recent tests or the military exercises alone suggest that. I mean, I think it probably suggests the opposite, that because that they are demonstrating operational readiness, right, through these military exercises, that they're also telegraphing resilience, show strength, resolve, and also by inference that their soldiers are fit for purpose, that the society is cohesive and is united. I'm not quite sure if the military exercises suggest otherwise. One can presume, based on what little we know, what existing knowledge we have about Kim Jong-un's government and his people, is that the last thing that his government would want to do is to show any kinks or chinks in their armor, that this country is weak or facing internal challenges that may suggest that they don't have this resilience and resolve.
Well, other than promote the fact that he has his country together, I suppose, what else do you think the regime really wants, Dr. Barry? Is it another round of negotiations with President Trump, or maybe a relief from sanctions?
Oh, in the long run, but good luck getting President Trump's attention right now. There's almost nothing North Korea can do under the present circumstances. The president has an image crisis of trying to appear that he's on top of a coronavirus outbreak that the media, for its own reasons, probably inflames, but at the same time he seems to contradict or undermine his health professionals. So that's why the president at his town hall with Fox News a few days ago just basically seemed to convey to a questioner that everything was under control and things are a lot better under him. The Pentagon has now replenished any dwindling stocks of weapons and ammunition that allegedly were the case under President Obama. And his relationship with Kim Jong-un is still good. So from the president's point of view, as he said with the first launch a week ago, I have no reaction. So he's basically saying, don't push me. And I don't think Kim Jong-un should take that with any bit of reluctance at all. The president is quite serious. The president does not wish to be pushed at this time.
Well, it seems that Kim Jong-un might keep pushing and prodding because on Tuesday, Kim Jong-un reportedly said that the North must continue strengthening its artillery training after overseeing the launches on Monday. He previously said that the world will see a new strategic weapon in the near future as well, beginning of this year. So does Monday's launch indicate progress in that regard? What do you think, Dr. Barry?
Well, it's the same weapon. According to Dr. Ankit Panda, who I mentioned last week, his analysis just about an hour ago from photos is that it looks to be the KN-25, which was the same projectile shot last week, only 3 of them. And apparently what they're testing, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Ong Webb, is the rapidity with which they can fire these weapons. So yes, they are trying to convey, hey, we're getting better at what we do. And of course, maybe Kim Jong-un is trying to see if he can push the envelope and get attention. But that would lead me to a much larger question, which you may wish to address in our discussion, which is what new thinking may have occurred for Kim Jong-un in the past 2.5 months that might make him think that he's got to strengthen the appearance of his bargaining strength compared to last year. And that may be what he's trying to convey, but only in part. There's always that domestic component. But yes, I think he is trying to flex his muscles in a way that it's unmistakable.
So you think the last 2 months have been really of strategic silence rather than just, sheer nothing, I suppose. Well, what about you, Dr. Ong Webb? Do you agree with this? How do you see this latest missile launch as, and do you see it as an indication of the North's weapons development? And how much progress do you think it's made?
Well, I concur with most of Dr. Barry's points. I mean, yes, based on the fledgling analysis that are coming out, in observance of these tests, clearly it's a KN-25 artillery rocket. It's a short-range missile that's launched off a mobile, a transport erector launcher. If anything, yes, the latest tests indicate that they are pushing the envelope, that now they've achieved near operational readiness and deployment capability for the KN-25. One study suggests that they can launch about 4 of these missiles from 1 TEL within under a minute. But I don't think that these tests suggest anything more about North Korea's weapons development vis-a-vis its intermediate and intercontinental range ballistic missiles. I think that's a separate category. And we haven't seen any of those tests yet. And this is where I have a concern for 2020. I mean, I agree with Dr. Barry that this is about the show of strength, telegraphing posture, flexing muscles. But I think it doesn't make a dent at all in the mind of President Donald Trump. He has a lot of other things to worry about. And so this intended mind share that Kim Jong-un wants to gain in the global public about North Korea's position is going to be ignored. And this is only going to push him, I think, further down the road to try and escalate. And this may bring us back to the dark years of 2016, 2017, when we saw a lot more saber rattling. So for me, I think that if Kim Jong-un isn't getting what he wants, he may probably want to take that step and start testing his ICBM capabilities. And I think that's going to be a different ballgame if that happens. I think the world will be in a different place of that.
It's a very clear-cut worry. I completely agree with Dr. Ong-Web. And my point about particularly January is that two things happened in January that took us all by surprise. One of them was the assassination by a U.S. drone of Iran's General Soleimani, who was always an open target. Everyone knew where he was, the Israelis, the Americans. He was pretty clear-cut about his travels, but bam, just like that, he went out. And, if you're Kim Jong-un, you never want to think that this president, Donald Trump, is not capable of doing that, even though we would all think that's highly unlikely. But perhaps even more important is the relevance of the so-called deal of the century, Trump's Middle East peace plan for North Korea, which is basically, this is a take it or leave it deal that totally favors one side. It basically puts the other side in a position of being a supplicant to pick up the crumbs. I don't want to go into all the detail, but if you're Kim Jong-un, you basically look at this and say, this man, this president, he just wants a take it or leave it deal. We can't negotiate with him at all. So you ask, why can't we get the negotiations back going again? Well, historically and institutionally, the United States doesn't want to give in an inch in negotiating if we can avoid it. But under President Trump, very little has been given in other than the toning down of military exercises and certain statements that have been uttered publicly. But simmering under the surface is a lot of bubbling and turbulence that create a lot of questions for what may lie ahead for the rest of 2020.
I see, and really what the North Korea did in the last 2 weeks, launch all these projectile tests. South Korea, well, it said that it hasn't been helping with peace efforts, and as you said, the US hasn't really given much of a substantial response. But the 5 European members of the UN Security Council, though, they did condemn the regime for what it did last week. And well then, how do you think these countries should really take this issue forward if the North does continue with its provocations? I mean, first of all, how should South Korea and the US respond? What do you think, Dr. Ong-Web?
Well, this is always going to be a tough one because we're always looking for that sweet spot to keep things at least as status quo. I think in this case, I'm in no position to suggest what the US government and the South Korean governments ought to be doing. But anything that can prevent an escalation would be helpful. I mean, this case here, one response is, which is the response we're seeing generally, at least from the Trump administration, is to move on and not allow this to rattle cages. And to make statements to that effect, that this is not, this doesn't mean anything to us. It's not anything important. But I think in the medium term, I think we might have to think of a better design in terms of strategy and policy, in terms of trying to maintain the status quo. So, I mean, of course, President Trump will do what he has always been doing, as Dr. Barry has mentioned that. I mean, this is a man who is a take it or leave it guy. But I think along the way, some small concessions may have to be given. I mean, if we can recalibrate the sanctions posture to some degree, that could provide a release valve of some sort and give less of an argument for the Kim regime to do what it does. And if it does do these things, these military exercises and such, and we could sort of take this regime to task, wrap it on the knuckles, so to speak. But it's hard to say. I mean, there's a fair amount of unpredictability on all sides, despite the fact that we know these players for some years now.
Right, and we're running out of time, I'm afraid. So before we go, Dr. Barry, do you see North Korea continuing to fire projectiles or furthering its tests of other weapons in the weeks to come?
Yes, I think you'll be doing a program next week on this same topic. And, but we may see when you have a string of three, there's a certain trajectory of where they're heading. And I think Dr. Ong-Web is hinting that after a while, they run out of a certain level of weapon and they're going to have to up the ante, so to speak. And then we'll see how the United States responds.
Great. Well, that's where we'll have to leave the discussion today. Maybe we'll regroup again next week, as you suggested. That was Dr. Mark Barry in New York and Dr. Ong-Web in Singapore. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Quite welcome.
That's all from us today at Global Insight. Thank you for watching. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with more expert analysis on issues making headlines. Goodbye.